Chapter 25. Test of Trust. Daryl and I stood just inside the entrance, looking around the cafeteria. Then the whispering came again. Behind the mesh-paneled wall at the far end of the room. Daryl turned fast, crossbow raised. I already had my Glock drawn, aimed at where I knew the prisoners would be. Then we saw them, 5 silhouettes behind the reinforced fencing, half hidden in shadows. One gripped a mop handle, another held a metal bat. Prisoners. Daryl took a step forward, crossbow raised. Who the hell are you? One of them answered. Who the hell are you? I stepped in beside Daryl, raising my voice slightly. Come on out. Slow and steady. The door creaked open slowly. Then they stepped into view, 5 men, and one of them immediately pulled out his gun, aiming at us. Whoa, easy now. Nobody needs to get hurt, Daryl said. Thomas looked at us back and forth before looking back at Daryl. Who the hell are you people anyway? Axel stepped beside him. Don't look like no rescue team. Daryl smirked. Today's your lucky day, fellas. You've been pardoned by the state of Georgia. You're free to go. They exchanged looks, uncertain, maybe even hopeful. But Thomas just kept staring at Daryl. Big Tiny spoke up. Chill, man. We're free now. Why we still in here? Daryl tilted his head. Man's got a point. Oscar chimed in. Yeah, and I gotta check on my old lady. Thomas looked back at them, then turned towards us again. Group of people breaking into a prison they got no business being in, makes me think there ain't no place left for us to go. Daryl shrugged. Why don't you go find out? Axel raised his hands. Maybe we'll just be going now. Thomas snapped. Hey, we ain't leavin'. I let out a quiet breath and shook my head. Thomas caught it. His gun turned to me. You got something to say? I looked at him. Yes. I pulled the trigger. One shot. Right between the eyes. He dropped like a sack of meat. This is a waste of time, I finished. The others panicked instantly. On your knees. Daryl barked, aiming his crossbow at them immediately. The remaining 4 dropped to their knees, holding their hands up. Andrew looked between us and the gun lying beside Thomas's body. He lunged for it, but before his hand even touched the grip, Daryl's arrow buried itself in his skull. Daryl drew his pistol without missing a beat, aiming it at the last 3. Axel was shaking, eyes wide, voice cracking. We don't have no affiliation to what just happened. Tell him, Oscar. Big Tiny just nodded quickly. Oscar muttered, stop talking, man. I stepped forward slowly. They froze as I crouched down in front of them, the fear settling deeper. You have 3 choices. I paused, watching their faces tighten. First, we kill you. Quick, clean, and you won't feel a thing. I kept my eyes locked on them. Second, you try your luck out there. Daryl snorted behind me. They step out of here, they die slower than that. Beat. Third, you work for us. You earn your keep. And you follow our orders. Axel didn't hesitate, nodding instantly. We'll join. Oscar nodded once. Big Tiny, slower, but followed. I stood up, never breaking eye contact. There will be rules. Daryl stepped up beside me. And if you break 'em, we'll put ya down like these 2, he said, kicking Thomas's dead body. The 3 of them nodded, barely breathing. Daryl walked over, picking up the gun Thomas had dropped. I looked back at the kneeling men. How much food do you have? Oscar glanced towards the back. Still plenty. Enough for 5 to last a couple months, easy. Daryl let out a low whistle. Show it. Big Tiny stood slowly, nodding, and started heading towards the back freezer. I turned to the other 2. Get up. They rose carefully, eyes never leaving mine. Axel looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot. Oscar, more composed, maybe even determined to keep his place. I watched them a second longer, then asked, what are your skills? Oscar glanced towards the freezer room where Big Tiny had gone, then looked back at me. I did maintenance around the prison, he said. Electrical stuff mostly. Wiring, light systems, pressure valves, basic fixes. I also worked the kitchen for a while, I know how the freezer works, all that. He paused, then added. Tiny, the big guy. He used to do janitorial and yard work. Strong as hell, not much of a fighter, but if you need something moved, cleared, or carried, he's your man. I nodded once. Then my eyes shifted to Axel. He swallowed, clearly nervous, and started speaking fast. I handled inventory here. Knew what went where, meds, gear, food storage, all that. But I wasn't just doing paperwork. He looked between me and Oscar, clearly trying to prove himself. I worked on the generators when the power cut out. Kept one running more than a few times. I'm not an engineer, but I know my way around fuel lines, plugs, belts, wiring, stuff like that. He hesitated, swallowing. If the systems still work, I can help bring the lights back. Maybe even the water. His voice dipped. I talk too much when I'm nervous. Sorry. He shut up immediately. They were more useful than I expected. Both of them were assets. And Big Tiny, he'd be a solid addition for any heavy lifting we might come across. I looked between the two of them. Good. I'll have a couple of jobs for you. Axel nodded quickly. Anything you need. Daryl and Big Tiny stepped back into the cafeteria after checking the food storage. Daryl looked at me, smirking. They're stocked. With what we've got back at camp, we won't be worrying about food for a long while. I nodded towards him once. Oscar's eyes flicked between us. There more of you. Daryl snorted. More than you think. I stared at them for a second before speaking. We'll be taking all the food. You three will get a week's worth. Their faces tensed, panicking a bit. I raised a hand slightly. Relax. We're planning to move here. If anything changes, we'll take you with us. That calmed them. A little. We started moving all the food back to the cell block, keeping a close eye on the prisoners in case they tried anything. Once we had everything gathered, stacked, and sorted, I turned to them. You three will clean the cell block, the cafeteria, and the yard. Every body, every mess, gone. I want this place spotless. They stayed quiet, listening. I continued. Do not enter any other blocks. I'll leave you one spare key. It will only lock the main entrance, that's it. I looked at each of them. And if anyone shows up, don't let them in unless they mention both of our names. They nodded slowly. We'll be making trips back here over the next week to bring more supplies to help upgrade the prison, and if necessary, more food, but remember the food we leave you has to last you for a week. Axel looked around, uncertain. So we just have to clean up. I nodded. Yes. Clear the bodies. Grab a mop and sweep every corner. Daryl scoffed. Great. Now you've got yourself 3 house husbands. I looked at him, unamused. Just bring the car inside. I'll open the gate so we can load everything up. He grunted and started walking back towards the car. After Daryl drove the truck inside, we started loading it with all the food and water. Once we were done, I handed the spare key to Oscar, repeating their tasks one last time. They asked a few more simple questions before we finally departed. Axel opened the gate so we could drive out, and they shut it quickly behind us to not let any walkers in. The road back to the farm was quiet. Just the hum of the engine and the occasional crunch of gravel under the tires. Eventually, Daryl spoke up. You sure about leaving them there? I looked over at him. This is a test. If they're going to betray us, they'll do it now, take the food we left them and disappear before we come back. I paused, then added. And if they don't, it means they're serious. Either way, it won't be hard for us to take them down if things go wrong. But we need manpower, and their skills are useful. Daryl nodded slightly. Yeah, fair enough. He glanced at me again. And what's this you mentioned back there, about all of us turnin'? You never explained that part. I stared ahead, watching the road disappear beneath the tires. It's in our blood. Daryl glanced over, brows pulling together. What is? The virus. The infection. It's not something you catch from a bite. We already have it. All of us. Everyone. His hands tightened around the wheel. So, you die, and you turn. No matter what. I nodded and looked at him. Doesn't matter how you go. Bullet. Fever. Old age. If your brain's still intact, you come back. Daryl let out a low breath. Shit, that means we gotta be extra careful. Someone dies in their sleep and turns dead in the middle of camp, in the middle of the night. That's a damn massacre waiting to happen. I nodded slightly. Exactly. That's why we need to be extra careful. He looked over, frowning. So we start keeping an eye on everyone. From now on, we will always stab the head. No exceptions. Doesn't matter how they died. Daryl just nodded, eyes still on the road. When's Rick planning to tell everyone else? I shrugged. Probably when he deals with his own problems. But if he doesn't say it soon, I will. He glanced over. What problems? I didn't look at him. Oh, nothing major. Just tension with Lori and Shane. And once he finds out she's pregnant, that'll be a whole new mess. Daryl's brow creased. He blinked, shifted in his seat, then leaned off the wheel slightly. Wait. He tilted his head towards me, eyes narrowing. You're telling me Olive Oil's pregnant? I nodded once. Then he gave a short, dry laugh, like it didn't even make sense anymore. What the hell is with this day and surprises? I just shrugged. No reason to lie to you. I know you're not the type to go running your mouth. Daryl let out a quiet scoff, resting his elbow on the doorframe. Their drama ain't got nothing to do with me. Daryl glanced at me, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Now tell me what's going on with you and the blonde chick. I didn't look at him. Nothing's going on. He let out a dry snort. Right. And I suppose she just happens to stand next to you every time. And she looks at you like you hung the damn moon. All coincidence, huh? I let the corner of my mouth tug upward. Right. Just like you and Carol. His smirk vanished. He glanced at me, jaw tightening. The hell's that supposed to mean? I shrugged. Oh, nothing. Just figured you were being friendly. Like when you slipped Dale those cookies for Sophia and Carl and told him to say he found them. Or when Carol brought you dinner yesterday, straight to your tent. Daryl just stared at me, caught off guard. He blinked once, then scoffed. You some kinda stalker now? I let the corner of my mouth twitch. Just observant. He shook his head, grumbling. Remind me not to do nothing nice around you. Can't even sneak damn cookies without getting profiled. I glanced at him. You're not as subtle as you think. He gave a dry laugh, then pointed a finger without looking. Same could be said for you, Romeo. I didn't respond. Daryl smirked, satisfied. Yeah, thought so. The second the car pulled into view, people started moving. I saw Rick first, coming from the house side, hand instinctively resting on his gun. Lori followed close behind. Dale stood up on the RV roof, squinting down at us. By the time Daryl cut the engine, half the group had circled the truck. We started getting out, and then movement caught my eye. Amy pushed through the others, shoulder brushing past Carl, nearly tripping in the dirt. She stopped short in front of me, eyes wide, lips parted. She didn't say anything at first. Then she reached up, sleeve already pulled halfway over her hand, and started wiping at my face. The dried blood smudged under her touch, turning the fabric red. It's not mine, I said quietly. She didn't stop. Her hand kept moving, trying to clean off all the blood on my face. She leaned in a little, voice barely above a whisper. Next time, I'm coming with you. I looked at her seriously. Not until you're ready. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but before she could say anything, Daryl cut her off. We got food, he called out from behind the truck. A lot of it. Enough to keep us fed for months. People started rushing towards the back of the truck, voices rising with disbelief as they saw just how much we'd brought back. Boxes of cans, crates of bottled water, even sealed bags of rice. Some just stared, like they couldn't believe it was real. But Amy didn't look at the food. She was still standing in front of me, sleeve stained red, eyes fixed on mine like the rest of the world had gone quiet. And just for a second, everything else disappeared. Test tube author's note. Thank you all so much for the support. We've officially passed 1,800 plus power stones. As promised, this chapter is longer than the previous two combined. I'll try to post even longer ones over the weekend. Hope you enjoyed the chapter. Let me know what you thought of the story and the character interactions in the comments. Thanks again for reading Black Heart. 48 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 26. Sparks of Tension. Less than third person POV greater than. The sound of laughter filled the air as the group finished unloading the truck. The supplies were stacked in neat piles as everyone gathered around them. Carl and Sophia were the first to spot the chocolate bars, their eyes lighting up with joy. Sophia didn't waste a second, bolting for the box, her voice echoing with excitement. Carl, look, chocolate. Carl quickly followed, running right after her. When he got closer to the pile, his face lit up with disbelief. There's so many, he exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. The two of them knelt beside the box, staring in awe at the rare treat. They grabbed a bar each, and Sophia looked up at Carol, silently asking for permission. Carol, who had been watching nearby, glanced around at the others, looking for any objections, and seeing nothing, gave a small nod with a soft smile. All right, you two. Just one each, she said, in a gentle voice. Carl and Sophia immediately tore open their wrappers, their faces lighting up as they bit into the chocolate. Daryl, who had been standing to the side, watching the scene unfold, couldn't help but smile a bit. Glenn walked over to Dale, who was sitting on the edge of the RV. Looks like we might need to ration those chocolate bars, Glenn said, grinning and leaning against the RV. Dale raised an eyebrow, glancing over at the kids who were happily munching away. Oh, really? He said, his tone dry, and who's going to be the one to break the news? Glenn chuckled, shaking his head. I'm not doing it, you can have that honor. Dale smirked, clearly enjoying the moment. Yeah, I think I'll pass, he said, shaking his head. I'm too old for that battle. I'll leave it to the younger generation. He paused for a second, glancing towards Itachi and chuckling a bit. Besides, I've seen Itachi showing them how to handle sharp objects. I'd rather someone else test how good they are with them. They both continued joking and chuckling when suddenly, Lori approached them. Lori glared at them, hands on her hips. What do you mean he was teaching them how to handle sharp objects? She demanded, with a sharp voice. What exactly did he teach them? Dale and Glenn exchanged quick, uneasy glances, but neither of them immediately answered. Dale stepped forward, trying to ease the tension, his voice cautious. Lori, it's not like that, his voice becoming more cautious. He was just showing them how to throw knives. It wasn't anything dangerous, and the kids really enjoyed it. Lori didn't look convinced. She crossed her arms, clearly upset. That's not the problem. How could he just hand sharp weapons to little kids? Lori stared at them for a moment, clearly still frustrated. I can't believe this, she muttered, shaking her head, before storming off. As Lori stormed away, Dale and Glenn exchanged uneasy glances, both of them silent for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. Dale rubbed the back of his neck, his voice low. Well, that went well, his voice tinged with irony. T-Dog rubbed his hands together, grinning as he picked up a can of beans. Man, we won't have to worry about food for a long time with everything we have. Andrea, who was next to him, smiled. We won't be arguing over the last pack of crackers anytime soon. Jenner walked over with a thoughtful look on his face. I will be making a simple diet for everyone to keep you all well nourished and so we get all the necessary vitamins from our food. T-Dog chuckled, nodding at Jenner. Now that's what I'm talking about. A well-nourished diet in an apocalypse, who would have thought? Jackie walked up to them, raising an eyebrow as she looked at T-Dog. So the food I was making for you wasn't good enough? T-Dog quickly waved his hands in front of him, looking flustered. No, where did you get that from? You know your food's the best, Jackie. I was just talking about the nutritional value, that's it. He finished with an awkward laugh, trying to play it off. Jackie squinted her eyes at him, clearly not buying it. I'll let it slide this time, she said in a teasing voice as she walked back to Carol. T-Dog breathed a sigh of relief, watching Jackie walk away. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and chuckled nervously. Jim, who had been standing nearby, looked at him with a smirk. You just dodged a bullet there. T-Dog grimly nodded. No kidding. Jenner, who had been quietly observing from a distance, walked over, shaking his head with a slight grin. Never talk bad about a woman's cooking. The best option is you sleep on the couch, or she might poison you next. Jim and T-Dog both grimly nodded in agreement, understanding the unspoken rule. Rick walked up to Itachi, who was coming back after just cleaning up and changing his clothes. Rick asked Itachi, did you run into any problems while you were there? Itachi shook his head slightly. Nothing serious. And I'll be making some round trips to the prison a couple times a week. Rick raised an eyebrow. There are more supplies left. If you want, Shane and I can go. Just tell me where everything is. You know, you and Daryl don't have to do everything alone. Itachi shook his head. It's not about the supplies. I want to make that place into something we could call home. Rick sighed, rubbing his face with his hand before looking back at the group. Look, I really appreciate you looking out for us. I really do. But no one will want to move into a prison, especially not now. He glanced back at the group, who were happily sorting through food and chatting. We're safe here, there hasn't even been one walker in sight. The farm has wells for water and a lot of farm animals for food. It has everything we need. No one will want to leave the farm to go to a prison and live in some cells. Itachi turned slightly to face Rick, his gaze unwavering. And how long will this peace last? All it takes is some people with bad intentions or a horde, and this place will fall. Rick sat down next to Itachi, his body sinking slightly with the weight of his thoughts. He glanced at the others, his face troubled. Maybe you're right. I don't even know anymore what's the best thing for us. In here, everything feels almost normal, just a life on the farm. Last night, I even forgot the world had become a hellhole. And I just want my family to live a normal life. I want Carl to have a normal childhood. He looked over at Carl, who was happily talking to Sophia, still having some chocolate smeared on his cheek. And for some reason, everyone seems to be treating me like some type of leader of this group, when I'm just as lost as they are. Rick looked back at Itachi, his voice softening a bit but still firm. Look, I'll help you with your plans for the prison, but I can't promise we'll move there. Itachi glanced back at Rick, his gaze steady, his expression calm. Helping me is all I can ask for. I'm not asking for a decision now, Rick. But if we don't start preparing for the future, we might not have one. Rick placed a hand on Itachi's shoulder and smiled a bit. We'll talk about it later. For now, rest a bit and join us tonight. We'll be eating at Herschel's house. Lori and Carol will be preparing dinner. Itachi nodded. I'll be there. As Rick walked away, Itachi lingered for a moment longer, before he slowly made his way towards a quiet spot to gather his thoughts. A couple of hours later, the group was scattered around and getting ready for the evening. Carl and Sophia ran up to Itachi, who had been sitting off to the side, sharpening and cleaning his weapons. Hey, Itachi, Carl said excitedly, can you show us again how to throw knives? We've been practicing with rocks, but we want to try the real thing. Sophia bounced on her feet, eager. Please, Itachi, we promise we'll be careful. Itachi glanced up at them. As he was about to respond, Lori approached quickly, her eyes immediately going to Carl and then to Itachi. Lori walked up to them, her tone sharp. That's enough, Carl, I don't want you throwing knives around, you could get hurt. Carl looked up at her, disappointment flickering in his eyes. But, Mom, Lori cut him. You're still a kid, Carl, and knives aren't toys. You might think it's fun now, but you could get hurt. She turned to Itachi, her gaze hardening. And you should know better than to encourage him to do something dangerous like this. Itachi stood up slowly, his expression still calm, but his eyes seemed a little colder than usual, the usual indifference replaced by a quiet anger. If you want to keep Carl safe, it's better to teach him these things now, so he knows how to handle himself when it matters. Lori's expression hardened, and she grabbed Carl's hand and began pulling him away. Let's go help Carol prepare dinner. Carl looked up at her, his voice quiet but determined. But Mom, I want to get stronger and help Dad. Lori paused, looking down at Carl. Maybe when you're older. Carl's shoulders slumped, his disappointment clear on his face. He nodded without saying another word and followed closely behind his mom. Sophia awkwardly shifted, her gaze drifting from Carl to Itachi. Is it okay if you just teach me? Itachi looked at her, his expression thoughtful. Does Carol know? Sophia nodded quickly, meeting his eyes. She said it's okay as long as you're nearby. Itachi smiled slightly, turning around, giving a small nod. Let's go. You need to catch up to Carl. Sophia smiled brightly, her face lighting up with excitement. She skipped towards Itachi, following him closely behind. They stopped by a large rock near the woods. He turned towards Sophia, noticing her eager yet slightly nervous expression. Are you ready? Sophia nodded enthusiastically, her hands fidgeting with excitement. Yes. Itachi gave a small nod, his eyes softening just a bit as he saw the spark of determination in her eyes. Today, we're going to focus on movement. He looked at her with a serious expression. Being able to throw a knife is important, but what's more important is being able to move quietly, undetected. It's a skill that could save your life. Sophia looked at Itachi, her brow furrowing in confusion. Move quietly. What do you mean? Itachi nodded, his expression thoughtful. Moving without making noise is important. In a real situation, you won't always have time to stand still and throw your knives. Not to mention, knowing how to move undetected will help you in case no one is around to protect you, and it might just save your life. Sophia felt a bit of disappointment settle in her chest. She had been looking forward to throwing knives again all this time, and the idea of moving quietly didn't seem as exciting. She glanced down at the ground, her voice quieter. I thought we were going to practice throwing them again. Itachi noticed the shift in her expression and paused for a moment before responding. I know it's not what you expected, but you need to understand that moving quietly, staying unnoticed, those are skills that will keep you safe. Throwing knives is important, yes, but it's just one part of what you need to know to survive out here. He took a step closer, his tone soft but firm. I know it's not as fun as throwing them. But it's important. If you do well with this, I'll teach you something fun next time. Sophia's eyes brightened a little at that promise, and a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Something fun. Itachi gave a small nod. Yes, but you have to learn the basics first. Sophia stood a little straighter, the excitement beginning to return. All right, I'll try. Itachi smiled faintly. Good. Now let's start with the basics. Move slowly, focus on your steps, and try not to make any noise. Sophia looked down at her feet, trying to place each one carefully on the ground. She was moving slowly, but it felt awkward. She could hear every twig she stepped on and the leaves crunching. Itachi observed her for a moment before speaking again. Don't just look at the ground. Focus on where the weight is in your body. Your feet should land as softly as possible, like you're barely touching the ground. You're not walking, you're gliding. Sophia furrowed her brows, trying to understand. She took a step, then another, but her foot caught a small rock, and it scraped across the ground. It's okay, Itachi said, encouraging. It happens. Try to pay attention to your surroundings. You're not just trying to move quietly, you're also trying to blend in with the environment. Listen for the sounds around you. Sophia nodded and tried again. And the hours passed quietly as they continued practicing. Itachi was patient, offering occasional advice but mostly allowing her to work through her mistakes on her own. The sound of her steps slowly became softer, more controlled. It was far from perfect, but it was progress. Sophia would occasionally glance up at him, and Itachi would meet her gaze, offering a small nod when she got it right. There was no need for many words, she was learning, and Itachi was letting her find her own rhythm. As the sun began to set, Sophia took a final step, moving without making a sound. She paused and looked up at Itachi, waiting for his approval. Itachi gave a small nod. Good. That's enough for today. Sophia smiled, her body relaxing. Thanks, I think I'm getting it. He gave her a slight smile. You're doing well. Keep practicing, and it will get easier in no time. Sophia nodded eagerly. I will. Itachi glanced over at the camp, where the others were gathering around Herschel's house. It's time for dinner, let's go, don't want to keep your mom waiting. Sophia's stomach growled slightly at the mention of food. She smiled, looking back at him and back towards the house. Race you there, she said, darting off towards the house. Itachi watched her run ahead, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips, before sighing and running right after her. Thank you all so much for your incredible support, we've passed over 2,300 plus power stones. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Feel free to share your thoughts on the story and the character interactions in the comments below. Thanks again for reading, and for being a part of this journey. Black Heart. 38 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 27. Faded Memories. Less than third person POV greater than. Sophia and Itachi arrive at Herschel's house. Sophia was panting and laughing, running a few steps ahead of Itachi. I won, she says between breaths, her eyes sparkling with pride. Itachi smiles slightly and pats her head gently. Yes, you did. Good job, Sophia. Sophia beams, still laughing a little. I beat you. You're too slow. Itachi raises an eyebrow, but his smile doesn't fade. I'll keep that in mind for next time, his voice a little more playful. They reach the porch of Herschel's house, and the door opens to reveal Carol. Sophia, still glowing from her victory, runs to Carol. Mom, I beat Itachi in a race. I beat him, she announces proudly. Carol smiles warmly, crouching to embrace her daughter. That's wonderful, Sophia, she says, her voice full of affection. You must be really fast. Sophia nods vigorously, grinning from ear to ear. I told you I'm fast. Itachi steps inside, silently watching the exchange. Carol stands up and gives him a grateful smile before whispering. Thank you for looking after her today. Itachi nods slightly. It was no problem at all, and she's a good kid. Carol smiles softly, then motions towards the dining area. Well, dinner is almost ready. Come, let's sit down. As they head towards the dining room, the group is already seated, chatting and placing food on the table. Itachi, Amy, Sophia, Carl, Glenn, Maggie, Beth, and Jimmy take a seat at a smaller table set aside from the others, leaving the main table for the adults. Itachi sits down next to Amy, who gives him a quiet smile as he settles beside her. Sophia practically bounces with energy as she turns to Carl. I told you I'd beat him. Carl smiles, looking back at her. Yeah, you beat him, but he probably didn't even try. Sophia shoots him a glare. Hey, I'm faster than you too. Amy, hearing Sophia's bragging, couldn't resist making a playful comment. Wow, Itachi, she says with a teasing smile, looking over at him. I didn't know you were so slow. Maybe I should challenge you next time, huh? Itachi looks at her with amusement. You might want to think that through, Amy, he responds, with a hint of humor. Sophia, overhearing the conversation, laughs triumphantly. See, I told you. Itachi might look fast, but he's actually slow. Amy smirks, glancing at Sophia and then back at Itachi. Well, next time I'll show you both how it's done, she jokes. Sophia, still on a high from her victory, grins widely. Bring it on, Amy. I'll beat both of you. The group continues to laugh, the conversation shifting as the chatter grows more comfortable. Glenn takes a sip from his glass and looks around the group. So, what did everyone do before all this happened? And what did you want to do in the future? I mean, we all had plans, right? He gestures around the table, inviting everyone to share. Maggie, sitting next to Glenn, thinks for a moment before speaking. I was working on the farm with my dad. I never really had plans beyond that. I figured I'd take over the farm one day, maybe raise a family of my own. She glances over at Glenn briefly, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Beth, sitting next to Jimmy, joins in. I was in high school. I thought maybe I'd go to college, study something, maybe music. I loved singing, could have gone into something like that or maybe becoming a veterinarian, just like Daddy. Jimmy just smiled. Well, you can still do it when they find the cure. Beth nodded happily, a small spark of hope in her eyes. Yeah, I guess so. The group exchanged uneasy glances, unsure if they should tell Beth and Jimmy the truth about the cure. Before Glenn could respond, Maggie spoke up. Maggie looked at Glenn and asked, "So what about you? What did you do?" Glenn shrugged slightly. "Well, I was a pizza delivery guy." He chuckles, a bit embarrassed. "I know, not the most exciting job in the world." Maggie teasing with a smile. Carl mutters with a grin. "A pizza would be nice right about now." Amy glances at Carl. "You know, we could probably make a simple one with everything we have." Sophia and Carl both snap their heads toward Amy, mouths open in disbelief. "Really?" Amy, a bit startled by their reaction, nods slowly. "Yeah, we have flour, and they just brought back canned tomatoes." Sophia and Carl burst out giggling, imagining the idea of actually eating pizza after so long. After the laughter dies down, Glenn looks over at Amy. "So, what about you, Amy? What did you do before all this?" "Never really had the chance to ask you." Amy smiled softly. "I was studying to be a teacher, early childhood education. I always wanted to teach kids." Amy then remembers something and turns towards Itachi. "Wait, I know you did some training since you were young, but what did you do besides that?" Itachi stays quiet for a bit before answering. "I never really went to school or anything like that, didn't have that option." The group falls silent, surprised by the response, and they all look at Itachi, waiting for him to explain more. Amy asks hesitantly, "You never went to school?" "Like, never." Itachi looks at her. "No, I went to it until I turned 12. Amy continues asking, her voice slow, trying to understand. "Was it because of your family's training?" Jimmy, Beth, and Maggie exchange looks, stunned by the mention of some kind of family training. Itachi shakes his head slightly. "No, let's just say something happened, and I wasn't able to continue going to one." His eyes gain a distant gaze for a moment before quickly returning to normal. The silence lingers for a second as everyone processes Itachi's words. Glenn, sensing the tension, quickly interjects to change the subject. "Hey, does anybody know how to play guitar?" Dale found a cool one. Patricia, who had been listening from the other side of the room, turns towards their table. "Otis does, and he's very good at it." Patricia turns towards Otis, smiling slightly. "Why don't you play for us, dear?" Otis smiles awkwardly and laughs a bit. "Sure, but I'm not that good." Glenn quickly stands up with a grin on his face. "Doesn't matter. We'll take what we can get." He walks away to grab the guitar. Otis watches Glenn for a moment before shaking his head with a small laugh. All right, I'll play something." Glenn comes back and hands Otis the guitar. Amy leans back in her chair, glancing around at the others. "Guess we could all use a little music," she says quietly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Sophia smiles, her enthusiasm still strong. "Yeah, music sounds good right about now." Amy laughs a bit before leaning closer to Itachi. "I'm sorry if I brought something bad up," she says quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Itachi shakes his head slightly, smiling softly at her. "It's okay. Don't worry." For a brief moment, Amy feels the distance between them slip away, replaced by a quiet warmth. She opens her mouth to say something, but before she can, Itachi gently reaches out and holds her hand softly. It's a simple gesture, but it's enough to make her heart skip a beat. Amy looks at him, surprised. She doesn't say anything, she simply relaxes into his touch and leans against his shoulder. She closes her eyes, her body relaxing into the comfort of the moment. The music from Otis' guitar fills the air, soft and soothing, and the gentle hum of the group's voices joins in, creating a peaceful rhythm. Test tube author's note. Hey everyone, a quick update. I'm getting back into my full working hours, which means I'll be working 8+ hour days. Because of this, I might not have as much free time to write as before. Here's what I'm thinking. Would you prefer daily uploads with chapters ranging from 1,000 to 1,500 words, similar to this one or chapter 23, or would you rather get longer chapters but less often? Just a heads up, on Fridays and Saturdays, I'll still be able to upload longer chapters, and maybe even on Sundays, depending on my schedule. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Let me know what you think about the story and the character interactions in the comments. Your feedback means a lot. Thanks again for reading Black Heart. 37 comments 0 vote. Chapter 28. The Princess Bet. Less than McPov greater than. As I stepped out of my tent, Amy was already waiting for me. She stood next to the RV, leaning against it. She looked up with a small smile as she heard me approach. Took you long enough, she said softly. I raised an eyebrow. You beat me by 1 minute. Still counts, she replied with a smirk and, already turning towards the forest trail. I shook my head, slightly surprised by her morning energy, and started following her. When we reached the clearing, she stretched her arms over her head, letting out a slow breath. I've been practicing, she said. Promise not to laugh. I won't, I responded with a kind tone, a bit surprised by her drive. I pulled a kunai from my pouch and met her gaze. Today, we'll spar again. Show me what you've learned. She nodded, though her movements were hesitant. She clearly didn't like this part of training, not when it meant swinging a real blade at me. I motioned her forward with one hand. Come at me. She stepped in and began to strike, and every swing lost speed as she got close. I deflected them without effort, sidestepping most of them without even raising my kunai. After a few rounds, I stopped and took a small step back. You're still holding back. Amy looked frustrated. Well, yeah, I don't want to stab you. I stared at her for a second, then tilted my head slightly. If you can land even one hit on me, I'll grant one of your requests. She blinked. Like a genie. I paused, then gave her a mocking smirk. Sure, anything you want. Not like you'll actually win. Her eyes narrowed, the hesitation evaporating. She adjusted her grip and dropped back into a stance that was, almost decent. Oh, you're on, she said. She took a step closer, twirling the kunai in her hand like she was warming up. And when I win, you're gonna wear one of Sophia's dresses for the whole day. Let's see you try to kill that princess nickname. I stopped mid-step, staring at her. How the hell did she know about that? Amy caught the look on my face immediately and smirked. Thank Daryl for that. He hasn't used your real name once, just calls you that every time. I'd be surprised if the whole camp doesn't know by now. I didn't say a word. Just glanced off towards the tree line where the camp was. Say goodbye to your bike, Daryl. She didn't wait for me to count down. Amy rushed forward the moment I shifted my stance, leading with a wide slash. I stepped aside, deflecting it with a flick of my wrist. Her next strike came low, aimed at my ribs. I caught it on the flat side of my kunai and pushed her back again. You're still telegraphing your swings, I said calmly. Maybe you're just reading my mind, she muttered, already charging in again. She was faster this time. Still, every attack was blocked. Every kick was redirected. Every feint was countered before it even finished. You're leaving your side open, I said after another parried strike. Don't lead with your shoulder like that. Amy grunted in frustration but didn't stop. She spun and slashed again, feet kicking up loose leaves as she moved. After another 5 minutes, her form started to falter, her breathing grew louder. I could see the frustration in her movements as she got more sloppy. The next time she attacked, I caught her wrist and used her own momentum to send her tumbling to the ground. She groaned, coughing once as the dust settled. You're okay? I asked, stepping forward to offer a hand. But she didn't take it. Instead, she pushed herself up. Her hand casually brushed across the dirt. The next time she charged, she feinted high and then flung a fistful of dirt straight at my face. It was a smart move. But she should have waited longer and done it more descriptively. I tilted my head slightly, the dirt flying past me harmlessly. Amy blinked, stumbling to a stop, clearly expecting at least some kind of reaction. Seriously, she said, exasperated. I just stared at her, deadpan. Next time, don't be so obvious about it. She let out a frustrated groan and collapsed back onto the grass, arms spread out. I give up, you're impossible. I walked over and stood above her. Better luck next time, I said, offering a hand. She grabbed it, and I pulled her back to her feet. She was covered in dirt and breathing hard. You tried something clever, I said as we turned to head back. Amy wiped her hands off on her pants, grinning through her exhaustion. Had to at least try. I'm not gonna let you stay unbeatable forever. I glanced at her with a smile as we started walking. Shouldn't you aim for something feasible at least? I said quietly. Amy huffed, muttering under her breath. At least I didn't lose to a little girl. I raised an eyebrow, glancing at her. So that little kid's better than you? She blinked, realizing what she'd just implied, then groaned. I'm too tired for this. We just started walking back to the camp in comfortable silence. Then, just as the edge of the farm came into view, she stopped walking. I noticed her stopping and turned around towards her. When I turned around, she was still standing there, arms hanging loosely by her sides, eyes glued on me like she was debating something. She didn't say anything, just stepped forward, closing the space between us. Then she raised a hand and pointed past me. What's that? I turned my head slightly, instinctively scanning the area behind me. And that's when she leaned in. Soft, sudden, her lips pressed gently against my cheek. By the time my mind caught up with what was happening, she was already stepping back, a grin forming on her face. I win, she said quickly, her voice a little shaky, then turned and bolted toward the camp, her face glowing red. I just stood there, watching her back as she ran off, a genuine soft smile forming on my face. The warmth from her kiss still lingered on my cheek. Test tube author's note. Thank you all so much for the support. We've officially passed 400 plus power stones. Quick update on the upload schedule. I'll continue aiming to release chapters daily, but if there's ever a day without an update, don't worry, it just means I'm working on making the next chapter longer or more polished. I don't want to rush through anything and risk lowering the quality just to meet a deadline. Some chapters need more time, especially when I want to cover a lot or end things the right way. So if a day is skipped, just know a bigger chapter is coming the next day. Hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know what you thought of the story and the character interactions in the comments. I love reading your reactions. Thanks again for reading Black Heart. 38 comments, 0 vote.